James Packer has hit the jackpot. He's won the battle to move to the next stage in developing a second casino for Sydney. The Crown deal includes a $100 million upfront licence fee to the state government. Premier Barry O'Farrell has said the determining factor was the benefits of a competitive casino market. But critics say the right way to handle such a major development was via tender rather than through unsolicited proposals. Shortly we'll speak to the Premier, but first, some background on the casino wars. It was a battle between Australia's two biggest casino operators, Echo Entertainment and Crown Limited. The glittering and lucrative prize, a licence for a second casino in Sydney. And for the New South Wales Government, that means revenue.
The unsolicited proposals presented to the government by both Crown Limited and Echo have been welcome because both sought to invest in this state, to grow tourism in this state, to create jobs. Invest in a sector that across Asia is estimated to be worth $34 billion.
This is a complete capture of political processes, state governments particularly, by the gambling industry against the public will.
James Packer's Crown proposal was for a $1.5 billion 60-storey tower with a hotel, luxury apartments and a VIP casino on the harbour side at Barangaroo.
What we're talking about, is a tables-only casino, no slot machines.
Echo's rival plan was a $1 billion expansion of its star property at Pyrmont into an integrated casino resort facility. Echo also wanted the government to extend its exclusive casino licence beyond 2019.
It's compelling, it's visionary, it's irresistible in our view.
James Packer's Crown bid hit the jackpot, with conditions.
Firstly, that the tax rate that would apply would be 29%. Secondly, that total licence and tax fees payable to the state government over the first 15 years would be guaranteed to be more than $1 billion. Thirdly, that licence fees and taxes would be independently reviewed at the end of 20 years.
Former banker David Murray was head of the independent committee which advised the government. Both he and the Premier stressed that the deal is not for a full-blown casino on the site, only for a VIP gambling facility.
They can do VIP for interstate, international and New South Wales residents, but no other gambling licence such as the Star has, no poker machines. And for VIP, the usual entry requirements and minimum bet levels are such that it can really only be undertaken by people who gamble a lot more than you see in the mass market.
That's what Adelaide Casino said, and within a year they said we'll go broke without slot machines, pokies, and they got them. Look, we know that any casino, even when it says VIPs, actually draws most of its revenue from people who live within a 20-kilometre radius. So I don't take much comfort from any of that.
The Reverend Tim Costello, who chairs the National Church's Gambling Task Force, says the average Australian wants less gambling, not more.
I think the Premier should have said, let's ask the people of Sydney if they need a second casino. Let's have a really open process. Sadly, state governments find it difficult to put up taxes. That's unpopular. Much easier just to do deals with gambling giants and get easy revenue. They don't count the cost of the social breakdown, the economic breakdown, the crime.
Both the tendering rules about public benefits have been subverted, and the planning process has been subverted. And so it's typical of the approach which is taken so often in this state, that a developer will say, in return for this public benefit, I want a building that's bigger than the rules allow. Then having got that building approved, you then say, I can't afford the public benefit.
So why do you think it's happened this way?
I suspect that an important person has gone to the government and given them an offer they can't refuse. not necessarily because of the merits of it.
Urban planner John Mant believes that under this solicited private sector proposal, what's been proposed for Barangaroo and what eventuates may be two quite different things, what he calls concession creep.
Having got it approved, what actually goes on inside it, I'm sure will change over time. And whether the casino gets bigger or smaller or changes the nature of it, whether the hotel is actually in the end built or not built, these things will move around, because first thing is to get a building of this size on a piece of public open space. And that's effectively what the Cabinet has done.
But the Premier has stressed that the process is not complete. There is not yet a final agreement.
Should there ultimately be agreement, obviously there are then planning, regulatory and legislative provisions and requirements to be met, and of course the public will get an opportunity through each of those areas to have their say.
That provides no reassurance to those who believe that Sydney simply doesn't need a second casino.
We take great pride that in Depression, Sydney got a harbour bridge, and it's an icon. Is this generation going to say we built one of the highest casinos, tallest in the world? That's our signature. No, I think that's a mark really of national capture, humiliation, indeed even shame.
And earlier I spoke to New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell in our Sydney studio. Premier, was there ever a doubt that James Packer was going to win this battle?
Absolutely. We had a Crown proposal, we had an Echo proposal, an independent steering group, and this week I could easily have stood up if the steering group had recommended Echo's proposal and made the same point as to why that investment would support tourism, jobs and economic growth in New South Wales.
But you've said that competition was a big factor in your decision, so did Echo ever really have a chance?
Absolutely. So Echo put in a very strong proposal to expand their facilities to also attract even more high worth gamers to New South Wales. So absolutely they did. But what ultimately the steering committee found was that in terms of increasing gross state product, in terms of additional revenues to government, the Crown proposal was 26% and 31% greater respectively than the proposal from Echo.
Quite simply, does Sydney need another gaming facility?
Well, I think Sydney can support a high worth VIP gaming facility if it means we're going to attract additional tourists to the city, which not only create 1,200 jobs at a hotel, but also will support jobs across the city through restaurants, through retail and the like. We need to grow the economy. That's what provides jobs for people across this state, and this is one way to do it, which yes, comes with a VIP gaming facility, but also delivers a 6-star hotel and additional economic activity into the state.
Did you look at whether there were any other ways of increasing revenue, increasing our place on the international tourist map, or was gambling the only way to do this?
No, we've been very clear about trying to grow our economy since day one. So whether it's what we're doing in the property sector, and we're now seeing in terms of residential housing significant increases there, which of course helps to grow the economy, helps to make housing affordable, or whether it's our deal with Qantas, a $10 million deal with Qantas to better promote tourism into New South Wales, whether it's, we will try and exploit the economy generally to grow jobs, to grow our economy, to grow opportunities here in New South Wales.
If you could have done that without a gambling facility, would you have preferred that?
Well, I've said before, if I could have had a 6-star hotel without a gaming facility, that would be absolutely my first choice, because we don't have a 6-star hotel. We don't have that sort of international resort destination hotel in this city. It's coming with a gaming facility. The good news is that it will seek to attract overseas and interstate visitors. The model in Melbourne has only 5% of local VIP people part of the gaming facility, and that brings people to this city, hire cars and cabs, restaurants, hotels, shops, supporting existing jobs, growing new jobs.
Tim Costello has said that this is a mistake, that any kind of gambling facility has enormous social implications. What would you say to that?
Well, I've heard some reports that the steering committee didn't look at these issues. Well, they did. That's clear from their report. Secondly, they put in place a number of measures to try and address it. One is a 24-hour cooling off period for any local VIP members of the facility, and secondly an opportunity for family members of anyone who is a local VIP to alert the regulator to have that person excluded if there are problems.
How will that work though? If someone arrives from the suburbs and walks in the door and seems to cover the criteria, how is this business of the family ringing up going to work?
Well, understand. So VIP gaming, you have to apply, you have to be assessed. All these people are regulated. You can't get in the door unless you're a member or you're a VIP, and those records are checked by the regulator. And under the proposal being put forward by the steering committee, if a family member is concerned about the gaming habits of another family member, the regulator would take action.
Now, you're saying it's a VIP facility. What happens if James Packer comes to you a year after opening day and says to you, you know what, it's not working, we're not making the revenue we were hoping for, we need pokies?
Well, firstly, there'd be a contract, and going back on the contract would simply not involve the government giving way. The government will enforce the contract. But secondly, for this to work, it requires legislation. That legislation will be about describing the facility as is finally agreed.
Can you give me an ironclad guarantee there'll never be pokies at Barangaroo?
Yes.
Now, on the decision to disband the Gaming Council, why did it take so long to realise there was a conflict of interest there which was potentially causing danger to the public?
Early this year, concerns were raised about a number of people associated with the Game Council, and when those concerns were raised, we immediately commissioned a report into the governance arrangements of the Game Council. So within a year of coming to office, we've put in place a governance review. That review, which came to us 2 weeks ago, made for horrific reading, whilst accepting that the Game Council had done a good job in promoting the interests of those who shoot and hunt across New South Wales in a responsible way. It made clear that the conflict between those activities of promoting shooting and the regulatory regime was an unacceptable risk to government.
You're now going to allow shooting in 12 national parks. Why?
Well, because we're going to bring into New South Wales what happens in South Australia and Victoria, which is that volunteer hunters in New South Wales, supervised by National Parks and Wildlife Service, focused on targeted feral pests, can assist us in keeping those feral animals under control in our national parks.
Would you have made that decision if the shooters and fishers didn't have so much control in the upper house?
In an ideal world, it may not have been, but it wouldn't have been agreed, Tracy, if we hadn't been convinced that programs in South Australia and Victoria had worked. So what we've said is that ultimately this program could roll out across 75 parks and reserves in New South Wales. That's 10% of our national parks and our reserves. We're going to trial it from October in 12 regional, rural and remote parks.
Do you dismiss the concerns that some people have about bushwalkers being shot?
I do, because under the risk assessment that's been undertaken for almost a year, that's involved national park staff, it's been peer reviewed, it's been tested. Like hazard reduction burns in our national parks, those areas that are subject to these programs where national park staff will supervise them, those areas will be closed. So the point is that if the park's closed, or that area of the park's closed in which these pest management programs are being undertaken, there should be no risk to anybody. National Parks and Wildlife Service have a history of using this as one of a range of means to try and eradicate feral animals. We're saying that what happens in Victoria and South Australia can be done in New South Wales, but we've put in the strictest controls, and it will be under the supervision of National Parks and Wildlife.
Barry O'Farrell, thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you, Tracy.